Steve Angeli is on campus, and this could be massive for Syracuse football.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day, and of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, it's a big one. Syracuse football has a Notre Dame quarterback on campus Monday, April 21st. Of course, I'm talking about Steve Angeli, and we're going to break down every possible angle here in case Steve Angeli actually decides to commit to Syracuse football. We'll talk about Steve Angeli as a player. Would he be the starter for Syracuse? Would he be the backup? Is there going to be a quarterback competition? What's going to happen to Rickie Collins and the other quarterbacks on the roster? We're going to talk about all of it here on this edition of Locked On Syracuse. But before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Let's talk about Steve Angeli as a player, his background, and then we'll dive into the potential ramifications if and when he decides to commit to Syracuse. So first of all, where's this information coming from? Well, multiple reports are out there by now about Steve Angeli visiting Syracuse, but I believe it was first reported by On3's Steve Wiltfong, all right? So let's talk about Steve Angeli now as a player. He is 6'2", 210 pounds. He's got multiple years of eligibility remaining. He has played sparingly for Notre Dame over the past couple of seasons. He only has 80 career passing attempts, but in those 80 career passing attempts, he has looked really, really strong. In fact, he had a brief cameo appearance in the most recent college football playoff where he did quite well. In his career, he completes well over 70% of his passes, over 11 yards per attempt, and a 10-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I understand it's only 80 passing attempts, but that is pretty good for only 80 passing attempts. And I am not surprised that Syracuse football at least got a visit from Steve Angeli. And the reason why I'm not surprised by it is because we talked about this at the end of last week. There's a lot of connections between Steve Angeli and Syracuse football. He was offered by the team back in the 2022 high school recruiting cycle. He is a New Jersey kid. And also Angeli's high school coach, in case you all missed that episode, well, he is the brother of Syracuse quarterback coach Nunzio Campanelli. There's a lot of connections between Steve Angeli and Syracuse football, so this is not a surprise that they are at minimum getting a visit. But let's get into the ramifications here. Would he be the starter for Syracuse football, or would he be the backup? I want to hear from you in the comment section below. Or do you think there's going to be a quarterback competition if he decides to commit to Syracuse football? Let's use our noodles, shall we? We got these brains up here. They do a lot of thinking. So let's think for a moment. Let's theorize. Let's hypothesize together. All right? Steve Angeli is coming from Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a big-time program, right? They were just in the college football national championship. They're a big program, Notre Dame. He transferred out of Notre Dame, likely because he was not going to be the starting quarterback there. That is going to probably be C.J. Carr. So let me get this straight as we talk about whether he would come here as a starter or a backup. He's going to leave Notre Dame, where he would have been the backup there, to go to Syracuse and remain the backup? Would he? I don't think so. That doesn't really seem like it would make a lot of sense, right? I mean, unless Notre Dame was just saying, we are not going to pay you a single dime of NIL, and so you better go hit the portal. Fair enough, I guess. But chances are Steve Angeli is going to look for a situation where he can start. And it's interesting because Syracuse, at least on paper and at least from Fran Brown's words, they have a starter. But I don't buy that Steve Angeli would come here to, he's going to be a backup. No way. Absolutely not. He's already done the backup thing for a couple of years at Notre Dame. If he was going to remain a backup, why not just remain at Notre Dame? So that's why I said on the last podcast that I don't think that Syracuse ultimately ends up with Steve Angeli because they have publicly already committed to Rickie Collins. Or so we thought. See, this is fun. In the transfer portal, oftentimes, you got to read the tea leaves. And in the case of Steve Angeli, there's a lot of tea leaves to read. This is very, very interesting. Someone who is looking for a starting job in all likelihood is visiting Syracuse football. It's funny because we talked about also on the last podcast, what type of backup is Syracuse, or not what type of backup, what type of quarterback is Syracuse football looking for in the transfer portal? What type of one? We know they're going to add. We know that. But when they brought in Zach Gibson from Georgia State for a visit, what did I think we most of us, I think we all agreed that if Zach Gibson were to commit to Syracuse football, he's not going to challenge Rickie Collins as the starter. There's no way. I get he's got 600 career passing attempts. That's cool. But there's no way, no how that Zach Gibson would take Rickie Collins' spot. He might take Jakhari Williams' spot, who's the current backup, a redshirt freshman. He's not taking Rickie Collins. Steve Angeli could. In fact, you can probably make the argument to me right now that he is a better quarterback than Rickie Collins. You really think he would come here to be a backup? Even to have a quarterback competition? I don't see it. So coming up, we're going to talk about Rickie Collins and what Steve Angeli's visit and maybe even a commitment would mean for him. That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and once again, we are talking about Steve Angeli, former Notre Dame quarterback in the transfer portal, visiting Syracuse today, Monday, April 21st. We talked about him a little bit as a player, his connections with Syracuse, and would he come to the Orange to be the starter or the backup? I think we can mostly agree that if he's coming to Syracuse, it's to probably start, or at the very least, it's to be given the opportunity to get the starting job. So what does this mean for Rickie Collins? Comment what you think in the comments section below. If Steve Angeli commits to Syracuse, what happens to Rickie Collins? I want to know your prediction in the comments section below. Don't worry. I will give you mine in this segment and coming up. All right. We have to also keep in mind with Steve Angeli, this is a visit. players can visit schools and not end up committing. Heck, corner Julian Neal from Fresno State would have been a great addition for Syracuse football. He visited Syracuse, didn't commit, visited Arkansas, committed Arkansas. It happens, right? That being said, if Syracuse really is truly pursuing Steve Angeli, and this is real and all indications seem to be that it is, then it means one of two things for Rickie Collins. Number one, let's give him the benefit of the doubt here. Rickie Collins' injury is more serious than what's being reported. For those that are unaware, Rickie Collins was named the starting quarterback by Syracuse head coach Fran Brown. We were all excited. It was pretty much a foregone conclusion. You were obviously going to name him the starter. You just got him from LSU in the transfer portal. No duh. He beat out the competition, Jakhari Williams and Michael Johnson and the true freshman. He was named the starting quarterback. The spring game was shortly thereafter. I believe it was on April 12th. And right before the spring game, it's announced that Rickie Collins is not going to play with a hand injury. But it was good news. Even though he wasn't going to play, which is obviously a bummer, it was told to all of us that the injury was not necessarily that serious. That at the very least, he was most likely going to be ready for fall camp. However, if Syracuse is truly pursuing Steve Angeli, we have to consider there are one or two possibilities as to why they might be doing so. And this is probably the first possibility, which is Rickie Collins' hand injury that we're being told is not serious might be more serious than what we're being told. Now, Fran Brown, he doesn't really have a track record of lying or, not telling the truth to the media. He's very honest, very forthcoming. But Syracuse does have a history, and it's not necessarily Fran Brown, but it does have a history of downplaying injuries or not telling us things, and then all of a sudden, bombshell report. I can think of two off the top of my head. Oronde Gadsden in 2023 suffers a lower body injury. I believe it was like his foot or ankle, what they told us, against Western Michigan. It was very early in that game. He left the game. He was on crutches on the sideline. I remember that game because I actually called play-by-play for that game. Jalen Buckley goes like 80 yards, second play of the game. I remember that very well. So Oronde Gadsden misses the rest of the game. Dino Babers, obviously he's not Fran Brown. He's in his press conference and he's like, yeah, he's going to be fine. I think he's probably said he's got a little owie, which is what Dino Babers loved to say. He's got an owie. It's going to be okay. And that was the reporting over throughout the week. Oronde Gadsden was going to be fine. And then about an hour before kickoff, Syracuse was playing Purdue the next week. Bombshell report. Oronde Gadsden out for the season, broken foot. So that's one example of them downplaying an injury. Want to know another example of them downplaying an injury? Let's go to the court. Let's go to the hardwood. Let's talk Syracuse basketball. How about Donnie Freeman? Plays against Florida State in early January. It's then announced days after that, hey, he's day-to-day with a lower body injury. I believe they called it like a right leg injury. Oh, he'll be day-to-day. He'll be fine. Does not play the rest of the season. I'm not saying Fran Brown is lying, but what I am saying is that if you are pursuing Steve Angeli, there are one or two reasons why. And the first possibility is the injury that we're being told is not serious to Rickie Collins' hand, may be more serious than we thought. Maybe he won't be ready by fall camp. Maybe week one is in jeopardy. Number two, want to go to the other theory? Rickie Collins isn't the guy. I know y'all probably don't want to hear that. I understand. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves here with Steve Angeli and him visiting Syracuse. Look, we knew that Syracuse was going to pursue a quarterback in the spring portal cycle. We knew that. The $1 million question was what type? What type of quarterback is Syracuse going to go after? You're going to go one that doesn't challenge for the starting job like a Zach Gibson, which I told on the first segment, or are you going to go for one that can actually start? Steve Angeli can actually start. If Syracuse is pursuing another starting quarterback in the portal, what does that say about Rickie Collins? Sure, Rickie Collins may have been good enough to win a quarterback battle over the last few months, beating out Michael Johnson Jr., beating out Jakhari Williams, beating out the true freshman. He might have been good enough to do that. But this staff has had months to look at Rickie Collins. They've had months to do it. They got him in late December. They've seen him throw. They have seen him with the offense. Maybe they just don't believe he's got it. Maybe they're not ready to turn it over to Rickie Collins. I know they named him the starting quarterback. I understand. But why are you then going after Steve Angeli? What do you think? I want to hear from you in the comments section below. Because I don't know. Is it an injury? Is it that they don't believe in Rickie Collins? Or is it just a check-in visit? Maybe. I also want to be very clear. This does not, in my opinion, relate to the Trevor Pena situation. I want to be very clear on that. I don't think it does at all. I know there was talk about how Trevor Pena had concerns about the quarterback situation. So, now Syracuse is responding by going after Steve Angeli. I think Trevor Pena left for the money. I believe he brought up the quarterback situation as leverage to try to get more money. The only relationship I see between maybe Steve Angeli and Trevor Pena is that whatever money Syracuse had set aside for Trevor Pena, well, now it's free to be used elsewhere. So maybe they could actually just use that money to go get Steve Angeli. I do want to be very clear on that. Now, my prediction, I think if Steve Angeli commits to Syracuse, Rickie Collins just may enter the transfer portal again. That's my prediction. I told you on the beginning of the segment I was going to give you one. That's my prediction. I think he will. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Coming up, more quarterback talk. What's going to happen with all of them next on Locked On Syracuse. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you would like. And the all-in pricing feature means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I think by now we have established that something is fishy with Syracuse's quarterback room. They just named Rickie Collins the starter. He's currently out with a hand injury. We know that they were going to bring in a quarterback in the spring portal cycle. But they're going after Steve Angeli from Notre Dame, who is likely looking to find a place where he can start. Something is off. And I'm all for a quarterback competition, but I don't think we're going to get a quarterback competition. That's my prediction. I don't think we're getting a quarterback competition. Let's go over the possible scenarios here if Steve Angeli commits to Syracuse football. Virtual lock right here, okay? This is pretty much a given. The true freshman will remain. Syracuse football got 2 true freshmen in this most recent high school recruiting class, the 2025 cycle. They got Luke Carney and Rich Bell. I don't see why getting Steve Angeli would all of a sudden want to make them go out the door. Doesn't seem like they were going to win the starting. They didn't win the starting job anyway. I don't understand. Yeah. So they're going to stay. The true freshmen will stay, okay? but at least one quarterback is going to transfer. Maybe even both of these quarterbacks I'm going to mention are going to transfer. As of right now, you have Rickie Collins, the starter, and below him is redshirt freshman Jakhari Williams. If Angeli transfers to Syracuse, that's 3 quarterbacks. So let's talk about Jakhari Williams. Would he really want to be the third stringer? The third stringer behind 2 guys who transferred to Syracuse this offseason? Would he do that? Probably not, right? Probably not. I don't see it. I think he would walk out the door. As far as Rickie Collins, I think he would re-enter the transfer portal, which you can. You can go back in the transfer portal. I believe players have until April 25th to do so. You can transfer more than once in the same year and still be eligible to play in the following season. He's got multiple years of college eligibility remaining. And similar to Steve Angeli, he has been a backup at a big-time program already. He was at LSU. He was behind Jaden Daniels. He was behind Garrett Nussmeier. He was going to be behind Garrett Nussmeier again. And so he enters the transfer portal. He comes to Syracuse because he knows he'll have the opportunity to start. But if they get Steve Angeli, is that Syracuse's way of just saying, hey, man, you're not our guy anymore? Or now you're going to have to compete again? And the same thing with Steve Angeli. Is he going to come here and say, oh, I'm fine competing for the starting job? Because at the end of the day, only one quarterback can play. Only one plays. See, what drives me nuts in basketball is we sometimes say like, this guy isn't coming here to come off the bench. We will say that oftentimes, right? Well, basketball, there's 5 guys on the floor, and there's 40 minutes of the game, and you're subbing a lot throughout the game. You're making changes. At quarterback, you only got one. That's it. And your quarterback, for the most part, unless there's underperformance or there's an injury or maybe there's some Taysom Hill type package, your quarterback is going to be on the field for the entire game and for the entire season. Why would either one of them want to be the backup quarterback after just coming from a big-time program like an LSU or a Notre Dame and being backups there? It doesn't make sense. So I think Rickie Collins would leave. That's my prediction. I don't know for sure. My prediction, though, is that Rickie Collins would re-enter the portal if Steve Angeli commits to Syracuse. Comment what you think in the comments section below. So I guess for my final prediction, they're both gone. I think Jakhari Williams and Rickie Collins would leave if Angeli commits, but I think it could be worth it. Maybe. I'm all about winning games. That's what I want. We'll keep an eye out for more updates regarding Steve Angeli. This is the transfer portal. Things can happen in a hurry, so we'll keep an eye out for more news on him. Maybe this is the last we've heard of Steve Angeli. Maybe this is just a quick visit and that's it, and we never have to talk about the quarterback situation again. As far as what is coming up on the podcast in the future, there will be another full podcast tomorrow morning with Brian Smith, a recruiting expert. He's been on the podcast a ton. He's the host of the new Portal podcast, and we're going to talk about Syracuse football's mass exodus of players, but also a lot of players could be coming to Syracuse in this spring portal window. So that's going to be out tomorrow morning. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse and make sure you turn on those notifications so you know when I am dropping the next podcast. I will see you all again soon.